Hello, hello, so I'm really excited to make this video with Tira as well,
Hello.
like a sort of podcast. And so something that we did in the Punjabi lore series and also Legend of Mr. Singh is it's very structured, going through the culture, first the Indian culture and then the journey of an immigrant. But I also thought it'd be nice to also have dialogue, because when you have a dialogue, it's not so structured, and you also don't know where you're going to learn from it. And also, I've always really just wanted to do a podcast since lockdown, or a deeper conversation since lockdown. So I'm really excited, and none other than the most kind and insightful person I know. So yeah, I'm really excited to do that too. And then also, like in Greek philosophy, they often say that dialogue, you're entering together and you're learning something and then going away with something more. And so I find that concept really interesting, just listening to a lot of podcasts as well. In this podcast, I just want to theme it very generally and so it can help people. So for example, if you're at home, if you're just interested in philosophy or psychology, or whatever phase of your life you're in. So if you're, for example, in school and you don't know what subjects to pick, and you're going to university, or if you're in university and don't know what job you want to have, like you're at work or you're even retired. But the whole title of this is going to be Know Thyself. So how can we know ourselves better? And I thought none other than Tira, because I feel like you have a lot of insight just naturally into how humans kind of work or operate.
Mm-hmm.
So I had some good questions, so I hope you're excited.
Yeah, I'm excited.
That's good. I wanted to start just like, what might cause people to maybe like not know much about themselves? So we have like distractions in the modern age, like TV and cell phones, but that's kind of easy to kind of know, okay, I'm getting distracted, or this person's getting distracted. But at the fundamental level, it seems to do with attention. So maybe what causes lack of attention or your focus to maybe come away? So why would people maybe not know themselves too much?
Mm-hmm.
And not just in the modern age, but why has this been a question throughout time, like from Greeks in the Eastern side? And that's what I'm wondering.
I think a lot of it, people sometimes expect some big revelation or something deeper, like this life-changing truth that there's something that sets them apart, when I think we can maybe sometimes find the truth by seeing how similar we are to each other. Fundamentally, we're all kind of similar. We're the same kind of organism, we're the same biology, but psychologically we do have different traits and different experiences that make us who we are, and different temperaments and personalities.
Yeah, because for personalities, I forgot to mention before I go to personalities, you've got nice hot chocolate.
Oh yeah.
And you've got paper noting, or I think they're not called paper noting, but they're from Netherlands, and this is December now, so I don't know if this will go out or when this will go out, but this is like Dutch ginger
Christmas, Dutch Christmas nuts.
which is nice. But oh yeah, personalities. So I haven't mentioned about MBTI Myers-Briggs on the YouTube channel yet, but it's something I hope to go into, because there's many things I want to do, but I want to structure a bit. Everyone exists on a spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
For example, Myers-Briggs, you have INFJ, ENFJ, INTJ, you have 16, and everyone exists on a personality spectrum. So while it's good in knowing your personality, you don't want to get pigeonholed in it, but I think it's still a good thing to know yourself, because there's your personality and then there's like your attention watching your personality. So maybe if you haven't even delved into personality tests before, I would say you can take one. And there's a good podcast called Personality Hacker that I'd recommend. That really goes in depth to the cognitive functions, and so you can understand that. And I'll put a link in the YouTube description as well for that. But for the personality, is that important to know, or how important is it to focus on your personality?
So when I first found out about Myers-Briggs, I was like consuming all of the information I could about Myers-Briggs and really latching onto it. Not really latching onto it, but just so excited to find out and relating really majorly, because I found out that I was INFJ, which is a personality type, which is more on the rare side maybe. So it was interesting to find out the benefits and the limitations of this personality type, and kind of what you excel at and also what you struggle with. So I think knowing as much as you can about these different models for personality really can help you to identify, if you haven't already, or confirm things about you that you may struggle with or excel at. But not necessarily, like, that's not the limit of it. You know, it's guidance, but I struggle to really invest in it too much. Like, I believe it's true, but I think that if you start identifying with it too much, maybe you end up just consuming the information without making the changes, or being like, I am this way because it's my personality type.
You start to identify with it.
But I think like the model has advantages that you can actually grow and balance yourself out. So increase your extroversion if you're previously more introverted. You find out where you can grow, and maybe we all tend towards similar skills and personalities as we mature, and it's harder to distinguish.
I think that's quite good.
What you think.
That's quite a good point, because when you mature anyway, you start to, for example, mature in these personalities. But like you said, it's high leverage to know what you can leverage, if you know what I mean. So we spoke about like INFJ, and maybe if you're not familiar with the term, in Myers-Briggs you have 8 stacks in total of cognitive functions in your brain. And cognitive functions basically means that your brain is devoting energy into a specific function, how you process, perceive, and then interact with the world. And so I would be classed as ENFJ, and INFJ, they're just classes. And so, for example, I would be introverted, E could be extroverted, N would be intuitive. So if you had an apple, maybe a sensing person, which is S, would say, okay, this apple tastes nice, it smells nice, it looks nice. But the intuitive person would be like, why is this apple here? What is the cause of this apple? So they're sort of looking at more of the patterns and trends rather than the here and now. But it's not to say that intuitive person can't tap into that. It's that they're primarily using that process more. Then you have the T and F. So INFJ would prioritize more feeling rather than thinking. And J would be judging and perceiving, but not judging as in I'm a judgmental personality type, but it's just in how they would interact with the world. And these are just 4 letters, but there's a whole other layer to this, that how the cognitive functions interact as well. So I would really recommend, if you haven't already, to kind of look into that and understand personality type, as you said, to do it consciously.
Yeah.
So one thing I wrote down was, how does personality play a part in fulfillment? For example, your extroversion and introversion, and what can people practically, how can they know themselves better based on this? So if, like, I don't know if you've noticed a trend, or just in society in general, but people are like, and maybe it's more obvious for extroverts because they're always doing things, that you can see, hey, you need to slow down, you need to go and reflect and have that time to reflect. But maybe it's not so obvious among introverts because society don't really see introverts, so we don't really
Society does definitely see introverts. I
Okay.
wouldn't say that. I would just say where they get their energy from is different. So Like we're all extroverted at times, we're all introverted at times, but predominantly you either get your energy mainly by interacting with others and you feel recharged after being in a group or out and about in public, and maybe introverts with their alone time and spending time with themselves, they may feel more energized that way and they need time alone to recharge. That's how I kind of see it. And yes, sometimes personally I feel like sometimes I think I need more time alone to reflect, but actually most of my downtime is alone reflecting. So for me, I need to do, like, conversely, I need to do more and go out more and go out of my comfort zone more instead of thinking about thinking, if it makes sense. Getting stuck in a thought loop.
I think that's quite interesting as well, because going back to know thyself and like the Greeks and also just general philosophy, when you're talking about thought loops as well, I feel that would not be so relevant to maybe most of the population, because the population might not know they're caught in a thought loop, but they see a pattern developing, or they see a pattern in their actions developing, but might not associate it to a thought loop. That they might just see in actions in their patterns. So I guess part of know thyself. So why this phrase keeps coming up is the Greeks had written this on a door. I think it's called Adelphi, the place in Greece, and so that became quite famous phrase. And it was quite simple, but it's kind of the underpinning of Western thinking to really know yourself deeply, but not just, like we said, know your personality or know your likes or dislikes, but kind of know who is the one watching all of these thoughts and who's the one watching all your actions. So that's a really good place to start from, to kind of see what you're doing or how you're going about life from a non-judgmental perspective. And then you can start, like if you're going from school to university or university to work, you can start to look at these patterns from a non-judgmental way, rather than trying to get a goal or to achieve a goal. Just try to notice the patterns.
I think that's kind of what meditation is about, because often people might think it's very spiritual or woo-woo, and nothing wrong with spiritual things. I like spiritual things, but meditation is also just drawing attention to taking time out of daily activities to be with yourself and find out where your mind naturally travels to, because like most days you have similar thought processes again and again. So what is it that you spend your time thinking about? Meditation's really, really important for that, to find out, because if you don't notice the patterns before, then that's the time to notice them.
Yeah, I think that's quite important, because if you think about it, if you wake up and then you don't, like, your mind's just going already, and then you brush your teeth and you have breakfast,
or check your emails,
or maybe you go on your phone, or you go to school and work, and then you come home and you maybe have no time in the nature, you're just in the four walls of your house, and then you're watching TV or something, you go to bed, and then it gets repeated day after day, year after year. There's a cumulative effect, and a cumulative effect of not knowing. But if you make like a 1 minute gap in reflection, that knowing or that cumulative step is going to vastly increase. Even if you try to know thyself a tiny bit, over time it's going to exponentially increase, I would say.
And sometimes it feels very heavy, like you might be scared what you'll find, or like maybe you don't feel proud of certain parts of you, or certain habits you've gotten into, or addictions, big or small, or anything. But it's important to at least know them and not feel shameful, and talk to people, and life should have a fun element as well. So while self-development and things are important, I think it's important to engage in society and have fun, and don't lose, because I think there's tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of self-help content out there, and then I can end up watching hours and hours of it, and then you're like, well, that was amazing, but that wasn't much fun. I feel more lonely in a sense, because I have been now isolated watching how to how to live life healthily. Like I've become more isolated for spending too much time. So everything in moderation. You have to actually apply these things, but also don't be too hard on yourself when you make mistakes, but when you can't apply these things all the time. I think in 5 years, 10 years, however long you have to live, or even further than living, I don't know. Even when you're a zombie, you will never know yourself, know thyself, however you see it. Like, we will not reach this perfect standard, and that's okay. That's completely fine, and we should be content with that. So remember to talk to others, like breathe in the fresh air, go for a walk with people in nature. It doesn't always have to be by yourself. And ask people, like find trusted people if you don't have them already, and ask them, what do you think about me? Like, as a family, we like always ask each other, our parents, each other, like we encourage each other what we find great about each other, or what things we can improve on. When you feel like you're in a good mood, that you can take that on board in a constructive way. It's good to ask people for feedback, because otherwise we have blind spots, or we nitpicking something small about ourselves, which might not even be like a real issue. It might be fabricated, like an illusion almost. Yeah,
that's so true.
I think.
And because I like Greeks, I'm going to take it back to Greek again. This is like the Socratic method, right? Because when you ask someone else if you're a blind spot, it doesn't need to be personal. It could just be like, if you're in a company or organization and you're trying to achieve some truth or result, it's sort of the Socratic method. So one person, so you have a two-person and a dyad, a dialogue, right? That's where it comes from. And so you have the two people here,
Star Wars.
and you're basically bouncing an idea off each other. And so you don't really know where the truth is, but by weeding out maybe what you disagree with, or you're having a refutement, but you're not actually attached to that idea, then you can actually work towards the truth, and that's the Socratic method. And so you can also do that internally, and that's part of knowing yourself as well.
And we change. So once you think you know yourself, you might change again. Everything changes all the time.
And I guess that's what separates intelligence. So like you're talking about watching YouTube channels and everything, and you can gain a lot of intelligence about yourself. But intelligence I would classify more as adding. So you'd imagine that whiz kid at school who has their hands up and who can answer everything, or like some amazing billionaire. I'm not mentioning any names.
Do you know anyone?
Yeah, I know a few billionaires. But basically they are quite intelligent in what they do. But what separates, so that's sort of like fast and you're adding things. But if you think about wise and wisdom, wisdom is basically from philosophy. Philosophy means, philos means like love, and Sophia means wisdom, so love of wisdom. And so what wisdom really means, how I would define it, is maybe something different from intelligence, where you're not adding but you're subtracting. So there's something unchanging in you that can observe. And so that's the wisdom part. And so sometimes we can be trapped by the intelligent part, trying to know ourselves better, but there's also a wise part, and you typically relate that to an old wise man or an old monk. And it's not because maybe they've had such a long life. Yeah, they had such a long life, for example, that they're wise. It's more like they had a long life that they made a lot of mistakes, so they can subtract all the things away that was making them not wise.
Yeah, or add it, or keep remembering it.
Yeah. So I think that's also an important distinction between intelligence and wisdom. And when you're going about life, you can see the sort of like differences between them. If somebody then repeatedly finds himself wanting to complete a task together, or either like in a relationship a task, or a group, or even a whole country, just a task between countries, but they get triggered or they lose consciousness or focus on the task, or caught up on the story, their narrative or argument. So we talked about like knowing yourself, but that's maybe you're meditating and you're getting there. But when you're part in a group or a country or a relationship, and you could be completing a task from cleaning something all the way to setting a law in the UN. Like, like, because it's easy when you're by yourself, but then how can somebody go forth and know yourself, but like practically do so in an environment?
Like, how do you apply
Yeah.
what you learn? Well, everyone automatically helps out the group collective by doing the self-improvement. It translates in how you talk to each other and have empathy for each other and communicate with each other. And number one in teamwork, if you're all trying to get to the same goal, that is the trust has to be there. You have to figure out if your goal is actually the same, what your definitions are, and things like that. And yeah, wait, what was the question?
I was sort of just like, well, to make it simple,
what's good
it's
teamwork?
like,
Or
so know yourself, but then suddenly when you're put in a pond with other people who may or may not know themselves to some extent,
oh,
how
so
can you keep the
dysfunctional people.
authenticity?
Okay.
So like, I think authenticity is quite a good thing to do in all your work and how you go about life, speaking and everything. So yeah, like how would people
remain authentic in
remain
groups?
authentic? Yeah.
That's interesting. Because most people want to fit in and not be rejected anyway. So you can easily decide not to be authentic. Or not even decide. You can easily slip out of being authentic just by being agreeable even. And just by saying, yeah, like, I would love to do this. Or even if you don't think it's a good idea. Or just going along because you don't want to be rejected or seem like bossy or imposing. But the best way to be authentic is just saying your points of view kindly and getting your point across like in a logical way. I feel like taking out emotions kind of helps when you're trying to reach goals and tasks together as a team. Obviously with relationships and family and friends, it's probably more personal, so you shouldn't just like remove all your emotions and just become a robot. But yeah, I don't know, struggling to answer this one question.
Yeah, I think it's just like, just keep practicing probably by yourself, and then as you go along each stage, I would say don't worry too much about not knowing yourself, because if you reflect afterwards on the situation, then you're already knowing yourself better, because you're saying, hey, I was in that situation and I wasn't acting authentically.
Yeah.
So then you're getting that.
That's true.
And then if you're in a group as well, and of course, if you don't reflect and you're like, yeah, you're going with the group, then you think you're being authentic. But then if you're by yourself and you think differently, then you're like, hang on a minute.
That's not.
Something's not quite right.
Yeah.
So often the normal or the higher purpose might not be found by speaking to loads of people, getting their perspective, but sometimes it might be you find it within yourself.
I feel like most things in life are like that kind of, is it called a dichotomy? I don't know, where it's like
a paradox.
Or they're like a paradox, like opposing things. Everything's just on a scale. So like in some occasions it's better to speak up more or to try and find out what other people think so you can figure things out. And sometimes it's better to stay back, take a step back and take time for yourself and think before you speak, because all of us will have a tendency towards one or the other. And in different situations it calls for different responses as well. And you don't want to be thinking every time you're in a group, oh, should I do this different, should I do that different? Then you become kind of psychotic and you're thinking too much and you're not just being there and seeing how things naturally play out. I feel the time for reflection is later. If there's something that disturbs you, or if you accidentally disturb someone, then you can kind of reflect and go back. But for me, almost everything, even like apart from some moral cases which are extremely black and white, most things in life are on some kind of sliding
spectrum
scale. Yeah, a colour scale. Like you can rarely say this is the way this is, or this is that rule and this is that rule. There's always going to be some variation, and we shouldn't try to do things like in a particular way.
Because I guess I've been going through the generational story, like the culture and starting in India, and of course all cultures have developed in a certain way, and that was the first series. In the second series, you're sort of seeing like the immigration journey, and how it's how the recreation of culture, when immigrants come to UK, how does that happen? And so, especially for people, for example, who come from another culture household, because their family has come from another place and they had to work very hard in a new culture and community. Obviously, bringing up to a certain level, like from a socio-economic perspective, the future generations, so second and third generations, may have a certain level of perfectionism or have a certain level of, or they maybe can't see, because like at school you might have a doctor, lawyer, engineer, and maybe like you have like a vague thing like, hey, I like writing, I like talking to people, I like I don't know, geography, or I like sewing, or like, I don't know, it could be anything, but or like fashion design, but it could
You
be
had
like
that one
so.
deep down inside, you waiting to come out.
Yeah,
Fashion
I
design.
really like designing dresses. Yeah, so basically, but you'd probably like skirt these things to the side and say like, hey, these things like are just like extra stuff, but like to get a career is like doctor, lawyer,
Here's the
engineer.
serious careers, the main
Yeah.
things.
So you don't really have that in your head, and so maybe looking outside that lens, and it's not just immigrant families, society as a general, right? So looking outside that lens, it can be very hard to see what's going on. But it's a very real thing where people getting maybe siphoned or funneled, and maybe if you're watching this, if you're from an immigrant household or a more
ethnic
minority, you might actually see these patterns in your own life or in family's life. And so I guess what we can ask is, for the human brain, if we look at humans walking about as computers in their brain, is it possible that you have many ancestors or many generations lineage? Can these thought patterns be inherited? And how can you start to notice these thought patterns and inheritance, and how can you start to change that? So I think that's quite fundamental on a societal scale, but also on a personal scale as well. Yeah.
So I was thinking about this before, and I was thinking like, you can inherit good things from your parents, right? Like, oh yeah, you're intelligent like your granny or your grandpa, nana ji nani ji, dada ji dadi ji, you've got this. Like, not just appearance wise, but traits wise. You can have a good memory, a small bladder, whatever. Well, that's kind of physical, isn't it? But yeah, I'm thinking about bladders. But yes, so you can also be passed on through like even just watching from a young age how your parents act, or like you just sometimes adopt their characteristics as well. You see how to be a human, how to live and be a good human, and then you copy your parents, or subconsciously pick up on views and values and beliefs, limiting beliefs, beneficial beliefs, whatever it is. So I think definitely you can pick up
and I was
baggage.
listening to like Dr. Chatterjee's podcast, which is called Live Better More
No. Feel better, live more. That was...
Feel better, live more. And it was really interesting. One of the guests said from 0 to 7 years, even when the baby's in the womb, they can actually pick up on the emotions going on. And no, there was another person. And from 0 to 7 years old, your brain is sort of like a sponge, and it's picking up all of these different programs and way to act and behaviors, and then from then it's kind of a bit more set. And as you're going through life, you're going through life with that set of programming, almost like the brain has been programmed. So that's really interesting. So if you catch any thought loops or programs or scripts happening, make sure to right click and open and edit in Notepad.
Yeah. But I also think like, even if your parents are the most chilled out parents, although even if they don't directly say something to you about a specific career and you can follow whatever you would like, and sometimes you go to your place of worship, or you go to family friends, or you go to a hobby when you're a child or a teenager, and even parents from, just majority people, this is Scotland, people are praising their children, like, oh wow, they're doing medicine, they're doing engineering or whatever. So it's easy to take on, even if your parents don't explicitly put a pressure on you to complete a certain path. There's always a societal expectation that you just hear through, like, passively, like,
through osmosis.
yeah,
And
osmosis water.
and if you've I actually talked about this specific thing, praise versus criticism, in one of my WordPress blogs. I think it's one number 14, but you can look on that one where I talk about that nuance and detail and the research behind it. But while criticism is good, without criticism you won't achieve a goal. Constructive criticism, I sort of show how much too much criticism or lack of praise can actually affect relationships, specifically in children. So that's a really good point as well. And just keeping it on the more like pattern or general side, I think that can be very helpful for society in general, just companies, because people are quite focused on KPI metrics. It's not something you can measure, criticism or praise, and that also has an effect on culture, which therefore drives people to do tasks in a certain way, or the relationship to the task.
Just as we cannot be hard on ourselves and expect ourselves to be perfect and get things perfect all the time, I think sometimes we can use society or elder generations as a scapegoat and say that maybe they're criticising too much, maybe they were too lenient, whatever the case may be, that they didn't do this or that correctly. But I feel benefit of the doubt, the easiest way to live your life, and I know people might think it's getting walked over, but I think you can say your piece in a kind way. You can always say your piece in a civilised way, but the easiest way to live is to give people the benefit of the doubt, even if it's completely sometimes delusional, and just, give people space to breathe. If we do that, I feel most people can do that, and as a society it's easier because we're not expected to be perfect, and then people are not hiding their dysfunctional sides as much, and we can be, maybe it's really idealistic, but we can be there for each other more. I always just think deep down people are just doing the best with whatever situation they grew up in, whatever's the best with what they know or what they feel deep down, and everyone makes mistakes, but most of us are just doing the best with what we can do. Usually there's no malevolence or behind people's, you do get people that are a bit not evil, they have bad intentions towards you. You've got the serial killers out there, the stalkers, or you get even just the casual person who revels in stirring the pot and creating drama. But I feel those are fewer, or I'd like to think that they are fewer than the people that are, saying things by accident, or saying things and not realising the effect that it has on people, young people, and as you're growing up,
like they say, like probably ignorance is the root and stem of evil, so it's just ignorance, it's just not awareness. So maybe just to go on the final question for people and bring it back to knowing themselves, just like you said, idealistic versus practical. How can we keep this balance between being so idealistic and being practical, right? Because we can say all these things, but then how do we chill, and how do we enjoy what we're doing and go through life like that? And I think that's really useful for maybe if you're young and you're watching this, and like I said at the start, to really know yourself. And I think that, I like going back to a lot of ancient practices because I know they stand the test of time and they have like a lot of dust. We always say old things are dusty, but in this case, the old things have all the dust falling off of them through the years, and now we can see what survived.
Smooth analogy.
Yeah, thanks. I'm very good at that. And what was I saying?
Yeah, you like to go to the tried and tested ancient.
Yeah, so the tried and tested kind of the more ancient philosophies. So for example, you have the yin and yang in Taoism, And this represents a yin-yang balance, right? Order, chaos, light, dark. And so there's no like dualism, there's actually a balance between the two. And that sort of represents also the idealistic and practical side. In my own background in Sikhism, there is a concept called midi bidi, where midi comes from the Persian or Arabic word Amir, and that means rich king, powerful in the time domain, and powerful in terms of material power. And we also have Bidi, and Bidi, it comes from a word, Arabic word I think, called beer, and beer represents the old wise man. And there's two flags representing this, but Bidi always stands one flag a bit taller, meaning that when you do things, like we just said at the start, if you come consciously and watching all the personality and all of the patterns happen, and then media, of course, is not just staying there and watching, but making these things happen. So it's a constant balance, it's a co-creation almost, and so that makes it really, really interesting. And these nice analogies, they're cropping up everywhere through different cultures. So it's really nice to see how different cultures have kind of perceived this similar wisdom in a sense as well.
I just think a practical thing to do is maybe take time, like I know some people are busy, but even once a month or once every 2 weeks, I feel like that's once every 2 weeks is probably often enough to review everything that's going on and take practical steps towards your goals or towards any personal development you want to do. Every day you could meditate, but I think it might be overkill to analyze every single interaction and every single thing that you do. It could go too far. So practically I feel like, if you're trying to find a balance of doing things but also taking time and stepping back, so like you're saying practical, and I can't think of the other word. I feel it's spiritual.
Yeah,
like,
sort of.
It's kind of, I always feel the self-development and going within is more, well, I suppose spiritual is like a belief or faith, more like in, higher power type of thing. But I always feel...
Well, it's a more practical and reflective.
Yeah, reflective, maybe that's...
I would say.
Practical versus theoretical.
Yeah. It's sort of like that.
The theoretical work and the practical work's important. Practical work will make the results manifest in the like to actually see
in
manifestation of your hard work in the theoretical domain.
Yeah.
Convert to Laplace, solve in Laplace, and then put the equation back
into the temporal domain. So brush up on your Laplace for those engineers out there who did take that course by the appearance. But just to finish up on the last note and that last sentence or something to leave people on YouTube with, or yes, okay. to leave them with, just give them a nice practical standpoint about know thyself, and that's inspirational quote.
First of all, you're fine. You're doing well. It's okay. Everyone's on their own timeline. Just try to breathe and don't feel stuck. I'm here for you. I don't know who you are, where you are, but every day, it might not be a practical thing. I feel like we've said a lot of practical things in this video, but every day I, here in Scotland, meditate and hope that everyone's doing well and that things get better. And whether you believe in that kind of thing or not, just know someone's rooting for you. I'm rooting for you. I'm here. And we'll all get there in the end. It doesn't matter if you don't know what it is right now. If you're feeling lost or confused, we've all been there and we all will go through that. And things are temporal. Whether you die before your problem's solved or you manage to solve your problem, which I hope is the option that, manifests for you, you're going to do well. Just take each day at a time, each moment at a time, and have hope. Hope is the most
Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope.
Powerful thing, yes.
Thank you so much. So like I said, Tira is very insightful and at the end very kind, like you saw, that we're rooting for you. So thank you so much. And I hope you enjoyed that, my first deep, more podcast in a longer format, which has a more creative flow. I know it's a bit harder to follow, but hopefully you enjoyed it, took something from it. And just share it if you're interested. leave a like if you're interested, and also
Thanks for having me.
subscribe. Thank you,
Subscribe.
Tira. Bye bye.
Bye.
Yeah.